So it seems that Games Workshop's decided that we haven't had quite enough Space Marines recently. I've just announced a new set of 7 of them that could be used as squad inserts, painting projects, or a standalone kill team. Let's talk about the new Task Force Variel miniatures and the slightly annoying blind buy Space Marine lottery system that they're going to be sold with. Hello and welcome back to Warsbets Tactics, where today Games Workshop has announced some new Space Marine miniatures, and this one marks the next incarnation of the Space Marine Heroes range, where the idea is that you have individual miniatures sold in small blister packs as a sort of 40k gacha game style thing. They've shown off a whole bunch of new sculpts today, but also confirmed that they're going to be even more annoying than some of them in the past have been. In particular with some disappointing news that if you buy a full display stand of 8 of them, then you're not guaranteed to get every single sculpt, so they've made them less reliable. The Space Marine Heroes thing has been a thing for a good number of years now. This one is release wave number 6 for them, I believe. I think they started out with some Ultramarines and some Blood Angels ones. They've done a Terminator series of them and some Death Guard. Some of the first waves of them released first in Japan, maybe trying to play Warhammer into the kind of gacha game style thing there. And some of the early blister packs being around about £5, $8 or €6 or so. The idea is that you have a stand worth of 8 of them, so each individual box can be bought separately. In the past, the set of 8 used to guarantee you all the sculpts, though as mentioned, not now. And I feel like it did have some pros and cons. Fun individual models to buy, low investment if you just wanted a painting project or a bit of entertainment. They seem to be quite aimed at new starters to 40k as opposed to veterans perhaps. But on the downside, on an individual module basis, they're maybe not great value. Say you could just get an intercessor for £6 rather than say £4 that you might be normally. You can't field them as a normal 40k unit without a little bit of creative interpretation, and certainly a bit pricey if you want the whole set, which even on the old style of doing things means that you need to pick up some duplicates. After the first 3 release waves of them, the 4th one was a Primaris team called Strike Force Variel. It seems that today's release is really quite similar to this one in a whole bunch of different ways. Basically this one just took one Primaris Marine out of a whole bunch of different squads, a couple of intercessors, an assault intercessor, an eliminator, and a heavy intercessor, all led by a Space Marine captain, and they were the ones within the blind box, and they also added the selling point in that they'd get kill team stats, so each one of the box sets comes with a little instruction manual and a kill team datasheet card, again maybe being a very easy access thing for newer players, where you could just fill these as a really simplified kill team that doesn't have any in-depth options. This particular force is now being sold alongside their Death Guard equivalents, which I believe were Series 3. They're in the Kill Team starter set now. I feel like the Death Guard ones had a lot more interesting character on their models though, and they did some things a bit more differently compared with the Primaris. For what you get in the box sets, they come on these sort of style sprues. They generally tend to be printed in coloured plastic. The base is mounted on the sprue itself, unlike plenty of 40k things, and that means that they can have a little bit of sculpted detail on the base that's usually a little bit flatter compared with some. Each of the Strike Force Variel ones were shown off with the bare-headed version, but I believe they all had a helmeted version that you could swap that out for. So you could have the entire team worth of Primaris with helmets if you'd like, and I believe that the idea behind these was that you could assemble these without any glue or tools, so straight from the box set, fairly thin supports on the pieces that are on the sprues, so you can just snap them off. They're still likely to look a lot better and not have little messy bits all over the model if you do clean them up a bit with some tools. Then after the Strike Force Variel ones, the previous one, number 5, was a Stormcast one for Age of Sigmar, so where along the way they renamed it Warhammer Heroes, deciding that it didn't literally always have to be Space Marines, even if 5 out of the 6 of the sets have been so far. Again, these ones had a whole bunch of fun sculpts for Sigmar. They're priced at £6 I think, or around £45 for a box set of 8. I believe that they were €7 or $8. I remember these ones being a bit more controversial as well, as they stopped guaranteeing that you get all of the sculpts in a big box set of 8, which I think was a pretty disappointing move really, and directly unhelpful for people wanting to pick these up. I feel like the whole blind buy nature of them felt a lot more palatable while that was an option. That brings us on to this series though, and this force is called Strike Force Variel. Strike Force Variel were painted up as Ultramarines. These ones are painted up as Dark Angels, though as is often the case for Space Marine miniatures, they don't actually have any specific chapter iconography on any of the miniatures, so you could paint them up as Ultramarine, Space Wolves, or anything else that you wanted. It means they're super generalist, but also means that maybe ultimately a bit less interesting, as they couldn't do fun Dark Angels details and iconography on them. It looks like these ones are super similar to the Strike Force Variel ones. 7 new Space Marine sculpts, though many of them really quite similar to what you get in say a normal intercessor box of one sort or another. I strongly suspect they'll probably have the head swap, and they've shown off the bare-headed ones, but I guess they'll still have a head swap so you can have a helmeted one as well. They've revealed 6 of the 7 sculpts for some reason today. They've decided to keep the lieutenant in reserve. That's the guy leading the squad this time around, though it's not too hard to interpret the silhouettes to find out what he is. I feel like the biggest appeals for them could be if you want a one-model painting project. Could be handy enough to test out a Space Marine army colour scheme without getting an entire box or something. There could be an option to track down if you really just like the theme look or sculpt of any one of the models. I feel like the Stone Guard Sergeant is a fairly cool one. Maybe the Reaver one kind of fun. A bunch of the rest I'm a little bit less convinced at being super different to the regular squads. You could try and get the whole squad to fill them as a kill team, though as mentioned it's going to be harder than before. Though I feel like the idea behind these from Games Workshop is that you could have these just sat on the counter and maybe appeal to people to get interested in passing. They are clearly aimed to be super beginner friendly and basically give you a one model hobby project at a far more accessible price than most. Feels like if you wanted to field them in 40k as their own unit, maybe you'd do so as an Intercessor squad or a Stone Guard squad for 5 of them. 4 out of the 6 of the revealed ones have a bolt gun of one sort or another, and maybe not the worst thing in the world if you count a Pyreblaster as another bolter, for example. Looking through the miniatures one by one, first up we've got an Infernus Marine Haroth, possibly one of the most boring there, aside from the bare head and I think a canister on his base there, not really looking in any way different to the Leviathan ones. The Stone Guard Sergeant is a bit more of a fun dynamic miniature, barking out some orders there with a combi weapon under his arm. He's got a bit more bling as well, and some Stone Guard robe loincloth style things to mark him out as a veteran. He's got a pretty similar kind of vibe to the Ultramarine one from the Leviathan box set as well, who also has a combi weapon melter gun that's crooked under his arm and not ready to fire. Then we've got a Mohawked Assault Intercessor called Raphael. He's got a pistol ready to shoot and a few cartridge shells on his base. There's an Infiltrator with his gun ready to fire called Belath. Looks like he's got a bit of a scarred forehead and a spent magazine on his base. Maybe a slightly more interesting pose as well on a tactical rock. There's a regular Intercessor called Zeradim. Again, not really much interest there aside from a bareheaded option versus the helmeted. And then maybe another one of the slightly more fun ones is a Reaver called Nardin. Looks like he's got his grab chute deployed and is just touching down, kind of looking like he's sort of crunching or smashing some rocks up under his feet as he makes impact there. A tiny bit more fun as one of the more dynamic poses, I guess. Then finally the last one is the Mystery Lieutenant. I'm not 100% sure why Games Workshop have chosen not to reveal him. I can't imagine it's going to be the most exciting reveal in the world, given we're onto something like our 17th or 18th Primaris Lieutenant, I feel like. It seems if you wanted to generate hype for people picking up the sculpts, then now would be the place to do so. Instead they've just given us a silhouette for him. As best as we can see here, it looks like he's armed with a combat knife that you can see the silhouette for at the top left of the model, and also a pistol. So my guess would be either a Reaver Lieutenant or a Phobos Lieutenant. It doesn't look like he's got any sort of grav chute like the other Reaver, so maybe an alternative sculpt for the guy on the left with a smoke bomb. I guess potentially he could be one of the more interesting ones out of the box set, given that Games Workshop charge characters at such a big markup. That Reaver Lieutenant on the left costs £24 or $37. So kind of interesting that you might be able to get one for far cheaper than that. But on the other hand, you don't know what the rarity of the box sets are. It might well be that he is a super rare one compared with the rest of the miniatures, and it sort of ruins any sort of economy for it anyway, not knowing which one you'd get, so you'd be dependent on buying them second hand from people who have bought a lot of them, I suppose. Overall, some of the sculpts might appeal to some people, and as mentioned, I feel like there are some uses that people might have for them potentially. Though for the most part I just can't really see too many people getting too excited about these. The vast majority of them just don't really feel any significantly different to the Space Marines that you get in any single Primaris box set. And it does feel like a bit of a missed opportunity as well, given that you've got individual models here that you could create some really interesting sculpts for. Maybe trying to go for a few more Brave style model designs. They had the Blood Angel one with a missile launcher in the act of firing a rocket, which was quite fun. They did a bunch of interesting things with the Death Guard ones, having a bunch of Nurglings all over the place, as well as doing a pretty cool alternative sculpt for the Malignant Plaguecaster. In particular, ones like the Assault Intercessor, Regular Intercessor, and the Infernus Marine all just feel like they're a basic model from that box set, and don't really have anything particularly interesting or different going on here. I guess the idea is that they want them to appeal to all chapters to be starter friendly, but it does come at the expense of adding any Dark Angels fun theming, which might limit their appeal a fair bit and maybe limit sales a touch, I don't know. But on the other hand, you might have Dark Angels players genuinely seeking them out if they like them. For the release itself, the whole blind buy thing is a bit controversial in itself. They said that the release date will be sometime later this year. They said they'd be stocked in select stores. I believe that in the past they might have come to Target in the USA. I believe they were also sold on Amazon by people. and the Warhammer Heroes one do seem to have come to a fair few of the more standard Warhammer discount retailers around the world, though maybe a bit less reliably so than Games Workshop's standard plastic model releases. If going by the Warhammer Heroes one, I guess they'd be around about £6, €7 or $8, though knowing Games Workshop prices could always increase. As ever with these, the thing that maybe generates the single most discussion is the randomised blind buy nature, and whether that's an acceptable thing for Games Workshop to be doing. It does mean that if you just wanted one particular one of these miniatures, then it's super unhelpful, as you just wouldn't be able to get it without potentially going through a bunch of things. Theoretically, if you just continue to be unlucky, you could never ever get the miniature that you wanted, or only do so after burning through an enormous amount of expensive models. It means that if you want just one sculpt out of them, you're probably better off buying them second hand from people who have actually bought a bunch and opened them up. So just by the nature of that, you're probably going to be paying far more than they paid for it, to pay for them being a middleman, I suppose. I guess for the potential of them opening boxes up and then finding out that they've got really low demand ones that nobody wants. Just the idea of blind buy boxes would turn off a whole chunk of folks. It doesn't really seem to be sensible to get any one miniature that you want, so I'd certainly treat these more as a potential small entertainment bit of fun, and assume that if you are buying one of those, then you're going to get the one that you least want, and only bother to pick them up if you'd say be absolutely happy with the standard intercessor or assault intercessor or something. As I touched on earlier, it maybe feels like the thing that's provoked the most consternation and anger is the change from basically guaranteeing that you get one of each of the sculpts if you buy an intact for sale unit, to now explicitly stating that even if you buy one of the sets of 8 of them, there's no guarantee that you'll get all 7 miniatures, so it seems they've taken that appeal out of them. It's a pretty significant downgrade compared with the early ones, and it means that if you were a Space Marine or Dark Angel collector and you just wanted to be able to field Strike Force Variel, there's not really going to be a reliable way in which to do so. Even if they are completely random, which seems unlikely, usually with these style sets with other companies they'll have some miniatures that are more likely and more common than others. But even if that weren't the case, you'd still just by random chance likely be buying far more miniatures than you'd want before you look into getting every single one of them. I'd guess that uncertainty would really limit appeal to people who actually want to get lots of them. You're not going to get people picking up those 8 sets of boxes all at once as a result. So I don't know if that might be Games Workshop shooting themselves in the foot a bit there in terms of sales, and just limiting them to people who only want them for single boxes as entertainment purposes. In any case though, let me know your thoughts as to Strike Force Variel. Do you like any of the sculpts? What would you make of the Mystery Lieutenant? And could you see yourself picking up any of these or not? If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming. I do tend to post new ones just about every day. If you've been enjoying the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked in the video description if you'd like to help keep these coming. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with the chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link's down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.